Tonight, you are about to listen to a story that explains why your body feels calm or restless, focused or distracted, awake or ready to sleep, often without you consciously choosing any of it. This video is about hormones, the silent chemical messengers that move through your body, shaping mood, energy, motivation, connection, and rest long before thought ever arrives. We will explore how balance matters more than control, how stress rises and falls with cortisol, how sleep is quietly built by melatonin, and how desire, satisfaction, and emotional stability emerge from subtle chemical rhythms rather than willpower. You will hear how connection feels safe because of oxytocin, why anticipation is driven by dopamine, and how the body continuously works to return itself to equilibrium. Nothing here needs effort, action, or change. This is not a guide to fix yourself, but an explanation of how your system already knows what to do. As you listen, understanding will arrive gently, tension will lose its reason to stay, and the body can begin to trust its own natural balance again, allowing awareness to soften and sleep to follow naturally. Hormones work quietly, without sound or sensation, yet they shape nearly every experience you have before thought ever becomes involved. Long before you decide how you feel, how alert you are, or whether your body is ready to rest, hormones have already begun their work. They move through the bloodstream slowly and steadily, carrying chemical instructions from one system to another, coordinating balance without asking for attention. You never feel them directly, yet their effects are unmistakable, shaping energy levels, emotional tone, focus, and relaxation from moment to moment. Hormones do not react to single thoughts. They respond to patterns, rhythms, and ongoing conditions within the body. This is why changes often feel gradual, as if the body were quietly adjusting itself in the background. Hormones are not switches that turn states on and off, but messengers that gently guide transitions over time. These chemical messengers do not act independently, and none of them work alone. Every hormone exists within a wider network, responding to signals from the brain, the nervous system, and the environment itself. When one hormone rises, another often softens to compensate, maintaining balance through subtle cooperation rather than dominance. The body does not aim for extremes. It constantly seeks equilibrium, adjusting levels in small increments rather than dramatic shifts. Hormones communicate continuously, forming a slow conversation that never truly stops, even when you are asleep. This conversation does not demand awareness or control, because it evolved to function reliably without conscious input. The system trusts itself more than it trusts intention. Hormonal balance is not something you create. It is something the body continuously returns to. Because hormones work on longer timescales than thoughts, their effects can feel mysterious or disconnected from immediate causes. You may feel calm without knowing why, restless without explanation, or tired even when the mind feels active. These experiences are not random. They are reflections of hormonal signals adjusting the internal state of the body. Hormones respond to light, darkness, movement, stillness, stress, safety, and routine, interpreting the environment in ways thought never could. They do not judge circumstances as good or bad. They simply adapt chemistry to conditions. This adaptation is slow enough to feel gentle, yet powerful enough to shape behavior and perception. Hormones quietly decide whether the body should prepare for action or allow itself to rest. Unlike thoughts, hormones cannot be rushed or commanded into place. They respond best to consistency, predictability, and gradual change rather than force. When the body senses pressure or urgency, hormonal systems often tighten, increasing alertness and readiness rather than relaxation. When the environment feels safe and steady, these systems begin to soften naturally, allowing recovery and restoration. Hormones are therefore deeply sensitive to rhythm, especially daily and nightly cycles that signal when to engage and when to release. This is why sleep, light exposure, and routine have such a profound influence on how the body feels. Hormonal balance emerges not from effort, but from alignment with these quiet rhythms. The body listens carefully, even when the mind is distracted. The brain acts as a central coordinator in this system, translating experiences into chemical messages that guide the body's response. It does not issue commands abruptly, but releases hormones in measured amounts, adjusting levels continuously based on feedback. When stress is sensed, certain hormones rise slowly, preparing the body for alertness. When safety returns, those signals fade, allowing calmer states to re-emerge. This constant feedback loop ensures that the body remains responsive without becoming overwhelmed. Hormones are therefore not rigid instructions, but flexible guidelines that adapt moment by moment. They do not trap the body in a state, they guide it gently forward until conditions change again. Over time, these slow chemical messages shape long-term patterns rather than isolated moments. Sleep quality, emotional stability, motivation, and resilience all emerge from how hormonal systems interact across days and nights, not from any single event. When balance is maintained, the body feels quietly supported even when challenges arise. When balance is disrupted, discomfort appears gradually, often before the mind understands why. Hormones are early messengers, signaling the need for rest, adjustment, or release long before conscious awareness catches up. They are not warning alarms, but subtle guides pointing the body back toward equilibrium. Listening to them does not require action, it requires allowance. As you listen now, there is nothing you need to do to influence these systems. Hormones do not respond to effort in the way thoughts do. They respond to safety, steadiness, and time. Understanding how they work is not about controlling them, but about trusting the body's ability to regulate itself when conditions allow. This awareness alone can reduce tension because it removes the need to manage every internal state. The body already knows how to balance, how to slow down, and how to prepare for rest. Hormones have been doing this work quietly all along. As attention softens, their signals can unfold without interference, guiding the body gently toward calm and sleep. The body does not rely on language to understand what it needs. It communicates through chemistry, using hormones as a slow and reliable form of internal dialogue. Every sensation of calm, tension, alertness, or fatigue is preceded by a subtle chemical shift that prepares the body long before awareness notices the change. Hormones move patiently, not reacting to isolated thoughts but responding to overall patterns, rhythms, and repeated signals from the environment. They listen to light and darkness, to movement and stillness, to pressure and safety, translating these conditions into instructions the body can follow. This chemical communication does not aim for precision in the moment, but for stability over time. It values continuity over immediacy, ensuring that the body remains coherent even as circumstances shift. Hormones speak softly, but their message is consistent and enduring. This internal communication system works continuously, even when attention is elsewhere or completely absent. While the mind focuses on tasks, memories, or concerns, hormones quietly assess whether the body should conserve energy or prepare to act. They adjust heart rate, temperature, metabolism, and sensitivity without requesting permission. The body does not wait for conscious approval to protect itself or restore balance. Hormonal messages flow regardless of awareness, ensuring survival and recovery remain uninterrupted. This independence is not a flaw, but a strength, allowing the body to remain stable even when the mind is overwhelmed. Hormones are designed to operate beneath conscious effort, precisely because effort itself can be unreliable. Because this communication is slow and cumulative, its effects often feel diffuse rather than specific. You may notice a general sense of heaviness, lightness, calm, or restlessness without being able to identify a single cause. Hormones rarely create sharp emotional spikes on their own. Instead, they set the background tone against which experiences unfold. This background can feel supportive or strained, depending on how well internal signals align with external conditions. Hormonal communication, therefore, shapes the context of experience rather than its content. It determines how easily you respond, recover, and release. The body uses chemistry to prepare you for what is most likely to come next. Unlike rapid neural signals, hormonal messages are designed to last long enough to guide the body through extended states. Stress hormones rise gradually and fall slowly, ensuring that alertness does not vanish the moment a challenge passes. Restorative hormones accumulate quietly, preparing the body for recovery rather than forcing it into rest. This timing prevents abrupt shifts that could destabilize the system. Hormones smooth transitions, allowing the body to move from one state to another without shock. They create continuity where the mind might experience interruption. This slow pacing is what makes hormonal balance feel subtle but deeply influential. The body's reliance on chemical communication also explains why forcing change often backfires. When the mind demands immediate calm or sleep, hormonal systems may interpret that pressure as a signal of urgency rather than safety. In response, they maintain alertness rather than releasing it. Hormones respond best to consistency and permission, not command. They read environment and behavior as signals, adjusting chemistry accordingly over time. When the body senses predictability, hormonal messages soften naturally. Balance returns not because it is demanded, but because conditions allow it. As you listen now, the body is already receiving signals that nothing urgent is required. Stillness, steady sound, and the absence of demand all communicate safety at a chemical level. Hormones respond to this safety gradually, lowering alertness and allowing restorative processes to emerge. There is no need to wait for a specific sensation or outcome. The body understands this language instinctively. Chemical messages continue to flow, guiding internal states gently and reliably. In this quiet communication, the body prepares itself for rest long before sleep fully arrives. Hormones operate with a form of intelligence that is slow, patient, and deeply contextual, responding not to moments, but to patterns that unfold over time. They do not react impulsively to single events. Instead, they integrate information across hours, days, and sometimes even longer cycles. This slow intelligence allows the body to avoid overreacting, maintaining stability even when circumstances fluctuate. Hormones observe the overall environment, sensing whether changes are temporary disturbances or sustained conditions that require adjustment. Their responses are measured, designed to protect the body from extremes rather than amplify them. This is why hormonal shifts often feel subtle, building quietly rather than announcing themselves. The body trusts slowness because slowness preserves coherence. This patient form of regulation ensures that internal states do not swing wildly with every thought or emotion. While the mind can move rapidly from one idea to another, hormonal systems remain anchored, adjusting chemistry gradually to prevent instability. This anchoring provides a sense of continuity, allowing the body to remain functional even when the mind feels scattered. Hormones act as stabilizers, smoothing the emotional and physical landscape so that sudden changes do not overwhelm the system. They prioritize survival and recovery over immediacy, choosing balance rather than intensity. This steady regulation is what allows the body to endure prolonged stress without immediate collapse. Hormones absorb fluctuations quietly, distributing their impact over time. Because of this slow intelligence, hormonal signals often precede conscious understanding. The body may begin preparing for rest before the mind acknowledges fatigue, or initiate alertness before a challenge is consciously recognized. Hormones read subtle cues such as light levels, posture, breathing patterns, and environmental consistency. These cues are interpreted chemically, shaping readiness and recovery without requiring awareness. The mind often discovers what the body already knows, noticing sensations that hormones have been preparing for in advance. This sequence can feel mysterious, but it reflects a system designed to anticipate rather than react. Hormonal intelligence operates beneath awareness, yet it guides awareness gently. This anticipatory nature explains why attempts to override the body's state often fail. When the mind insists on wakefulness despite fatigue, or demands sleep despite alertness, hormonal systems may resist because their assessment of conditions differs. Hormones cannot be persuaded by thought alone. They respond to sustained signals that indicate safety, rhythm, and consistency. This resistance is not opposition, but protection, ensuring that transitions occur when conditions truly support them. The body does not ignore intention, it waits for alignment. Hormones respond when behavior, environment, and rhythm communicate the same message over time. Over long periods, this slow intelligence shapes enduring patterns rather than temporary states. Circadian rhythms, emotional baselines, and energy cycles emerge from how hormonal systems have adapted to repeated signals. These patterns feel natural because they are deeply ingrained, reinforced daily through chemistry rather than conscious choice. When routines are stable, hormonal intelligence maintains balance with minimal effort. When routines are disrupted, adjustment takes time because the system prioritizes reliability over speed. Hormones change carefully, ensuring that the body remains predictable to itself. Stability, not immediacy, is their goal. As you continue listening, this slow intelligence is already responding to the absence of demand. The steady tone, consistent pacing, and lack of urgency communicate that nothing needs to be anticipated or managed. Hormones register this environment as safe and predictable, allowing alertness to soften gradually. There is no moment when this shift must be noticed. It unfolds quietly in the background. The body understands that it can release effort without risk. Through this slow and reliable intelligence, hormonal systems guide awareness gently toward calm, preparing the ground for rest long before sleep consciously arrives. Hormonal balance is not a fixed state that the body reaches and then maintains without effort. It is a continuous process of adjustment that never truly stops. Every moment, small chemical shifts occur to compensate for changes in environment, posture, light, emotion, and activity. The body does not wait for imbalance to become obvious before responding. It anticipates and corrects constantly, keeping internal conditions within a narrow and safe range. This ongoing regulation is so quiet and precise that it often goes unnoticed until something disrupts it. Hormones are always in motion, not because something is wrong, but because balance itself requires movement. Stillness at the chemical level would be instability rather than rest. The body maintains calm by remaining gently active beneath the surface. This continuous adjustment explains why balance feels different from control. Control implies a final outcome, a state that can be achieved and held, while balance implies responsiveness and flexibility. Hormonal systems do not aim to eliminate variation. They aim to keep variation within tolerable limits. Small rises and falls are not failures of balance, but signs that the system is functioning properly. The body expects fluctuation and prepares for it, using hormones to absorb change without allowing it to escalate. This adaptability is what keeps internal states resilient rather than rigid. Balance is dynamic, not static, and hormones are the tools that make this possible. Because balance is always in progress, it depends more on patterns than on isolated actions. A single restless night or stressful moment rarely disrupts hormonal systems permanently. What matters is repetition, consistency, and overall rhythm across time. Hormones respond to what happens most often, not to what happens once. This is why the body can recover from temporary disturbances when stability returns. The system is designed to forgive short-term variation and recenter itself gradually. Hormonal balance is patient, trusting that equilibrium will re-emerge when conditions stabilize. This patience also explains why forcing balance often creates more tension than relief. When the mind demands immediate calm, sleep, or emotional stability, hormonal systems may interpret this urgency as a sign of threat rather than safety. In response, they maintain readiness instead of releasing it. Balance cannot be rushed because it depends on trust, and trust builds slowly through consistent signals. Hormones listen for repetition, not insistence. When the body senses steadiness over time, balance returns naturally, without effort or intervention. Over days and nights, this continuous process shapes a baseline state that feels familiar and dependable. Energy levels, emotional tone, and responsiveness settle into patterns that reflect how the body has been treated consistently. When care, rhythm, and rest are present, balance feels supportive rather than fragile. When these conditions are absent, the system adapts as best it can, often by remaining alert or guarded. Hormones are not judging these conditions. They are responding intelligently to what is available. Balance always reflects reality, not intention. As you listen now, The body is already engaged in this quiet balancing act. Nothing dramatic is required for it to function effectively. The absence of pressure, the steady pacing, and the predictable flow all signal that correction is no longer urgent. Hormonal systems can soften their adjustments, allowing internal states to drift gently toward rest. There is no point at which balance suddenly appears. It emerges gradually as unnecessary tension dissolves. This continuous process carries the body forward calmly, preparing it for deeper relaxation without any need for effort or awareness. The body does not respond well to control, because control implies pressure, urgency, and the expectation of immediate results. Hormonal systems are designed to sense safety and predictability, not commands or deadlines. When the mind tries to force calm, sleep, focus, or motivation, the body often interprets this effort as a sign that something is wrong. In response, hormones associated with alertness and readiness may rise rather than fall, preparing the system to deal with a perceived threat. This reaction is not defiance, it is protection. The body assumes that urgency means danger, and it adjusts chemistry accordingly. Control creates tension because it contradicts the conditions hormones need to release it. Balance, by contrast, does not demand change, it allows it. Hormonal balance emerges when the body senses that nothing must be managed immediately and that there is time to adjust gradually. Instead of pushing the system toward a specific state, balance invites the system to find its own equilibrium. Hormones respond to this invitation by smoothing transitions rather than enforcing outcomes. They lower intensity slowly, redistribute energy gently, and allow internal states to settle at their own pace. Balance works with the body's natural timing, not against it. This cooperation reduces resistance and makes change feel effortless rather than forced. The difference between control and balance becomes clear in moments of rest. Trying to force sleep often increases wakefulness, while allowing the body to rest without expectation often leads to sleep naturally. Hormonal systems interpret effort as engagement and release as permission. When effort fades, signals associated with recovery and restoration can emerge without interference. Balance does not require the mind to decide what should happen next. It depends on removing obstacles rather than applying pressure. Hormones respond to absence of demand more readily than to instruction. Over time, repeated attempts at control can train the body to remain guarded, maintaining higher levels of alertness even in safe conditions. Hormonal systems adapt to patterns, and persistent urgency becomes a pattern of its own. The body learns to expect pressure and prepares for it automatically. Balance reverses this process slowly by reintroducing consistency and ease. When the environment repeatedly signals that nothing is required, hormonal responses begin to soften. Trust is rebuilt gradually, not through effort, but through repetition of safety. This distinction explains why balance feels sustainable while control feels exhausting. Control consumes energy because it must be maintained constantly, while balance conserves energy by aligning with natural processes. Hormones favor balance because it requires fewer corrections and less ongoing effort. Once balance is established, it supports itself quietly, allowing internal systems to function smoothly without constant intervention. Control never rests, but balance does. The body recognizes this difference immediately at a chemical level. As you listen now, there is no instruction being given to your body and no outcome being demanded. This absence of control is itself a signal, one that hormonal systems recognize as permission to soften. Balance begins to emerge not because something is being done, but because nothing needs to be done. The body can adjust gradually, without resistance, allowing chemistry to settle into a calmer rhythm. In this space, tension has no purpose, and balance can return naturally, carrying awareness gently toward deeper rest. The body does not relax because it is instructed to do so, but because it detects safety through consistent, non-threatening signals over time. Hormonal systems are finely tuned to notice whether the environment allows release or demands readiness, and they make this distinction without conscious involvement. Safety is not registered through logic or reassurance, but through repetition, predictability, and the absence of urgency. When nothing needs to happen immediately, hormones begin to lower internal alertness naturally. This process cannot be accelerated because acceleration itself signals pressure. The body waits for confirmation that safety is stable, not temporary. Only then does chemistry begin to shift toward rest. Hormones associated with stress and vigilance rise when uncertainty is present, even if the mind believes there is no reason for concern. The body responds to tone, pacing, posture, and rhythm more than to explanation. Fast movement, irregular patterns, and mental urgency all suggest instability at a chemical level. In contrast, slow pacing, steady input, and lack of demand communicate reliability. Hormonal systems respond to these signals by reducing readiness gradually rather than abruptly. This gradual reduction protects the system from being caught unprepared. Safety must feel continuous before alertness is allowed to fade. Because of this, the most effective way to influence hormonal balance is not through direct intervention, but through environment and rhythm. The body listens closely to what is repeated rather than what is intended. When conditions remain calm long enough, hormonal systems begin to trust that calm will persist. This trust allows internal states to soften without fear of sudden threat. Balance emerges as a byproduct of safety, not as a goal to be reached. Hormones shift when they no longer need to protect. The body always prioritizes protection until it is clearly unnecessary. This explains why relaxation often arrives unexpectedly rather than when it is actively pursued. When the mind stops monitoring progress, checking sensations, or waiting for change, the body receives a clear signal that vigilance is no longer required. Hormones respond by lowering intensity quietly, without announcement. There is no single moment when this shift occurs. It unfolds across minutes and longer spans. The body does not reward effort. It rewards permission. Safety is communicated most clearly when nothing is being evaluated or demanded. Over time, repeated exposure to safe, undemanding states recalibrates hormonal baselines. The body learns that it does not need to remain guarded as often or as intensely. This learning is slow, but it is durable, because it is written into chemistry rather than thought. Hormones adapt to what feels consistently safe, reshaping internal rhythms accordingly. Balance becomes easier to return to because the system has learned that rest is allowed. This adaptation cannot be rushed, but it can be supported simply by allowing conditions to remain gentle. As you continue listening, the body is receiving exactly these signals. There is no requirement to respond, perform, or prepare. The steady sound, unchanging pace, and lack of expectation all communicate safety at a hormonal level. Alertness no longer needs to be maintained, and chemistry begins to shift accordingly. This shift does not need to be noticed to be effective. The body understands this language instinctively. In the presence of safety, hormones guide the system gently away from control and toward balance, carrying awareness naturally toward deeper rest. The body is constantly recalibrating itself, not toward perfection, but toward a state that requires the least ongoing correction. Hormonal systems are designed to adjust baselines slowly, responding to sustained conditions rather than momentary fluctuations. When pressure, urgency, or overstimulation persist, the system adapts by maintaining readiness as a new normal. When these pressures ease consistently, recalibration begins in the opposite direction, lowering internal intensity gradually and safely. This process cannot be forced because recalibration depends on evidence accumulated over time. The body waits to be sure that conditions have truly changed before allowing chemistry to settle. Hormones are cautious by design, prioritizing reliability over speed. This cautious adjustment is why balance often returns quietly, without dramatic sensations or clear milestones. The body does not announce recalibration. It simply reduces the need for constant correction. Heart rate variability improves, muscle tension softens, and internal rhythms begin to synchronize again. These changes may be subtle, yet they signal a deep shift toward equilibrium. Hormonal recalibration works beneath awareness, shaping how the body feels over hours and days rather than seconds. The absence of dramatic change is not a failure. It is a sign that the system is adjusting smoothly. Balance prefers subtlety because subtlety is stable. Attempts to monitor or measure this recalibration can unintentionally interrupt it. When attention repeatedly checks whether calm has arrived, the body may interpret this vigilance as a sign that readiness is still required. Hormonal systems respond to vigilance by maintaining alertness, delaying the return to baseline. Recalibration progresses most effectively when it is allowed to occur without observation. The body does not need to be watched to function correctly. It responds best when given space to adjust quietly. Balance deepens when it is not evaluated. Over longer periods, this recalibration reshapes how the body responds to familiar situations. Triggers that once produced strong hormonal reactions may begin to elicit milder responses. Recovery becomes faster, and internal states return to baseline with less effort. This change does not eliminate responsiveness. It refines it. Hormones remain sensitive, but they no longer overcorrect. The system becomes efficient, conserving energy by avoiding unnecessary activation. Recalibration does not dull the body, it optimizes it. This process also explains why consistency matters more than intensity. Short periods of relaxation cannot override long-standing patterns of pressure, but steady, undemanding conditions gradually rewrite them. Hormonal systems learn through repetition, adjusting expectations based on what happens most often. When safety and ease are consistently present, recalibration becomes inevitable. The body does not resist balance. It waits for proof that balance will last. Once that proof accumulates, chemistry adjusts accordingly. As you listen now, recalibration is already underway, even if it is not felt directly. The absence of demand, the steady pace, and the predictable flow all provide the body with reliable information. Hormones register that there is no need to prepare or respond. Internal corrections soften, and baseline states begin to shift gently. There is nothing to wait for and nothing to achieve. Recalibration unfolds on its own timeline, guiding the body away from control and back toward balance, carrying awareness calmly toward deeper rest. When balance is allowed to return without interference, it gradually becomes the body's default state, rather than a condition that must be recreated each time. Hormonal systems are adaptive, learning from repeated experiences and adjusting expectations accordingly. As periods of safety and steadiness accumulate, the body begins to assume that these conditions will persist. In response, internal alertness lowers not just temporarily, but as a new baseline. Balance no longer needs to be restored actively because it is no longer perceived as fragile. The system stops preparing for disruption and begins to conserve energy naturally. This shift is quiet, yet profound, reshaping how the body meets each moment. This transition does not eliminate responsiveness, it refines it. When balance becomes the default, hormonal reactions become more proportional, rising when truly needed and settling quickly afterward. The body remains capable of alertness, but it no longer stays alert unnecessarily. Entropy within the hormonal system is managed efficiently, preventing prolonged states of tension. Balance creates flexibility rather than rigidity, allowing the system to move smoothly between engagement and rest. Hormones no longer overcorrect because they trust that equilibrium will return. This trust is built through repetition, not instruction. Over time, this default balance influences emotional tone, energy availability, and resilience. Emotional responses feel less extreme. Recovery from stimulation becomes faster, and fatigue feels more like a signal than a burden. Hormonal rhythms align more closely with natural cycles of light, activity, and rest. The body begins to anticipate recovery rather than brace for exhaustion. This anticipation reduces the need for vigilance, allowing chemistry to settle more deeply. Balance expresses itself as ease, not as control. The system functions optimally when it is not being managed constantly. This default state also changes the relationship between mind and body. When balance is stable, the mind no longer needs to monitor internal sensations or outcomes. Awareness can shift outward or inward without triggering defensive responses. Hormonal systems remain calm in the background, supporting experience rather than shaping it forcefully. The body no longer demands attention because it is no longer strained. Balance becomes invisible precisely because it is effective. The absence of disturbance becomes the norm. Reaching this state does not require effort, discipline, or persistent self-regulation. It emerges when the body is allowed to experience enough uninterrupted safety to revise its expectations. Hormones adjust gradually, releasing the need for constant readiness. This release cannot be scheduled or accelerated. It unfolds naturally when conditions remain gentle. Balance settles in because nothing challenges it to leave. The body stays where it feels supported. As you continue listening, the system is receiving these conditions now. There is no pressure to respond, no signal of urgency, and no demand for performance. Hormonal messages soften, baseline states settle, and balance holds without effort. Awareness does not need to follow this process for it to be effective. The body already knows how to remain here. In this quiet default state, rest deepens naturally, and the transition towards sleep becomes smooth, unforced, and inevitable. Cortisol is often misunderstood as a hormone of danger, yet its true role is far more subtle and essential. It is not designed to create stress, but to regulate energy, timing, and readiness in a predictable rhythm that follows the natural flow of the day. Cortisol rises gently in the morning to help the body wake, focus, and mobilize resources, then gradually declines as the day progresses, allowing tension to soften and recovery to begin. This rise and fall is not accidental. It is a carefully tuned cycle that keeps the body aligned with light, activity, and rest. Cortisol does not ask the body to be anxious. It asks the body to be prepared. When this rhythm is intact, alertness feels clear rather than overwhelming. Stress appears not because cortisol exists, but because its rhythm is disrupted. In a balanced system, cortisol moves like a slow tide rather than a sudden wave. It increases when the body needs energy and awareness, and recedes when those demands pass. This movement is gradual enough to feel natural, yet powerful enough to shape mood, motivation, and perception. Cortisol supports attention, memory formation, and responsiveness, ensuring that the body can engage with the world effectively. It does not force action, it enables it. When cortisol follows its natural rhythm, the body feels capable rather than tense. Stress only emerges when this rhythm becomes stuck, elevated, or misaligned with actual conditions. The body relies on cortisol to interpret uncertainty, not catastrophe. When something unfamiliar or demanding appears, cortisol rises to provide temporary support, sharpening focus and increasing available energy. Once the situation resolves, cortisol is meant to fall back toward baseline, allowing the body to recover. Problems arise when recovery is delayed, not when activation occurs. Cortisol is not harmful in motion. It becomes burdensome when it remains elevated without release. The hormone itself is neutral. Its impact depends entirely on timing and duration. Rhythm, not intensity, determines whether cortisol supports balance or disrupts it. Modern environments often confuse this rhythm by presenting constant low-level demands without clear resolution. The body receives signals that suggest ongoing uncertainty, causing cortisol to remain higher than necessary. This state is not caused by weakness or overreaction. It is a rational response to ambiguous conditions. Cortisol responds faithfully to what it perceives, not to what the mind intends. When demands feel continuous, cortisol maintains readiness, waiting for a signal that release is safe. The body does not choose tension. It sustains it because it has not yet received permission to let go. Cortisol waits patiently for closure. Understanding cortisol as a rhythm rather than a threat changes the relationship with stress entirely. Stress becomes a signal of incomplete cycles rather than a personal failing. The body is not overreacting. It is holding energy in reserve. When conditions allow completion, cortisol naturally declines, restoring calm without effort. This decline cannot be commanded because commands imply urgency. Cortisol responds best to environments that feel resolved, predictable, and safe over time. Rhythm restores itself when the body senses continuity rather than interruption. As you listen now, cortisol is already responding to the absence of demand. The steady pace, unchanging tone, and lack of urgency signal that no immediate response is required. Cortisol does not need to remain elevated because nothing here asks for action or vigilance. Its rhythm can continue downward naturally, following its intended path toward rest. This process does not require awareness or intention. The body understands this pattern instinctively. As cortisol softens its hold, the system prepares quietly for recovery, guiding awareness gently toward deeper calm and eventual sleep. Cortisol becomes difficult not when it rises, but when its natural rhythm loses definition and begins to flatten across the day. Instead of rising and falling in response to clear signals, it lingers at moderate levels, keeping the body in a state of quiet readiness without resolution. This lingering does not feel like panic or urgency. It often feels like background tension, subtle restlessness, or a sense that rest never fully arrives. The body is not alarmed, but it is not released either. Cortisol waits, holding energy in reserve because it has not yet sensed completion. This unfinished rhythm creates fatigue without relaxation, alertness without clarity. The system remains active without direction. When cortisol fails to decline as expected, recovery processes struggle to fully engage. The body remains slightly activated, making deep rest feel distant even in calm environments. Sleep may arrive, but it feels lighter, more easily disrupted, because chemistry has not fully shifted toward restoration. This is not insomnia caused by thought, but wakefulness maintained by incomplete hormonal signaling. Cortisol does not refuse to let go. It simply has not received enough consistent evidence that letting go is safe. The rhythm has not ended, so the body remains attentive. Stress, in this form, is not loud, it is persistent. This loss of rhythm often emerges from prolonged uncertainty rather than intense events. Situations that never clearly resolve, expectations without closure, or constant low-level stimulation all signal the body to remain prepared. Cortisol responds faithfully, maintaining readiness because the environment has not signaled completion. The body does not distinguish between physical and psychological uncertainty at a chemical level. It reacts to tone, repetition, and predictability rather than meaning. When life feels ongoing and unresolved, cortisol mirrors that state. The hormone reflects the rhythm of experience, not its narrative. Attempts to suppress or ignore this state rarely succeed because cortisol does not respond to dismissal. Telling the body that there is no reason to be stressed does not alter chemistry if environmental signals suggest otherwise. Cortisol listens for consistency, not reassurance. It waits for a pattern of safety to emerge over time before adjusting downward. This patience is protective, ensuring that release does not occur prematurely. The body values preparedness until it is convinced that preparedness is no longer required. Stress persists not because the body is stubborn, but because it is cautious. Restoring cortisol's rhythm does not require eliminating challenges, but allowing clear transitions between engagement and rest. The body needs to sense when effort has ended and recovery is permitted. This permission is communicated through repetition, slowing pace, reducing stimulation, and maintaining predictability long enough for chemistry to adjust. Cortisol responds gradually, reshaping its curve rather than dropping suddenly. Rhythm returns when the body experiences closure consistently. The hormone does not need to be managed, it needs time and clarity. As you listen now, the system is receiving signals of resolution rather than demand. There is no task to complete, no outcome to reach, and no uncertainty to prepare for. Cortisol senses this steadiness and begins to loosen its hold, allowing recovery to move closer to the surface. This shift does not announce itself dramatically. It unfolds quietly as readiness becomes unnecessary. The rhythm begins to regain its shape, guiding the body away from persistent alertness and toward genuine rest. In this steady environment, cortisol can finally complete its cycle, preparing the system for deeper calm and sleep. Cortisol does not simply react to what is happening now. It adjusts based on what the body has learned to expect next. Hormonal systems are predictive by nature, shaping internal states according to patterns that repeat often enough to feel reliable. When stress, pressure, or stimulation appear regularly without clear endings, the body begins to assume that readiness must be maintained. Cortisol adapts to this expectation, settling into a higher baseline that feels normal over time. This adaptation is not a mistake. It is an efficient response to perceived continuity. The body prepares in advance because experience has taught it that release is uncertain. Cortisol reflects expectation more than event. This learning process happens quietly, without conscious registration. The body does not announce that it is adjusting its baseline. It simply does so in response to repetition. Over time, heightened readiness can feel like a permanent trait rather than a temporary state. The body becomes skilled at functioning under tension, even when tension is no longer immediately necessary. Cortisol supports this adaptation by maintaining a level of energy and alertness that feels sustainable but never fully restful. This state is not crisis, it is endurance. The body is not overwhelmed, it is prepared. Because cortisol adapts to expectation, sudden rest can feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable at first. When the body has learned to anticipate demand, stillness may be interpreted as uncertainty rather than safety. Cortisol remains present, waiting for confirmation that rest will last. This hesitation is protective, ensuring that energy is not released prematurely. The body waits to see whether calm is temporary or reliable. Only when calm persists does chemistry begin to adjust. Cortisol does not resist rest, it verifies it. This verification process explains why deeper relaxation often arrives gradually rather than immediately. The body needs time to update its expectations, replacing old patterns with new ones. Cortisol declines as the system learns that readiness is no longer required. This learning is cumulative, built from repeated experiences of uninterrupted ease. Each moment of sustained calm contributes to a new expectation. Over time, the body becomes confident that release is safe. Cortisol responds by reshaping its rhythm accordingly. Attempts to accelerate this learning through effort or analysis often slow it down. When the mind watches closely for signs of relaxation, the body may interpret this monitoring as vigilance. Cortisol responds to vigilance by maintaining readiness, delaying recalibration. Learning occurs most effectively when attention is allowed to drift and the body is left undisturbed. The system updates itself best when it is not being questioned. Cortisol adjusts quietly when nothing suggests it should remain alert. As you continue listening, the body is gathering new information about what to expect. The steady tone, unbroken pacing, and absence of demand all suggest continuity rather than interruption. Cortisol registers this environment as predictable and non-threatening. With each passing moment, readiness becomes less necessary. The body learns that it can release without risk. This learning unfolds gently, guiding cortisol back toward its natural rhythm and allowing the system to move closer to genuine rest and sleep. Cortisol is meant to complete a cycle, not to remain suspended in readiness, and the body is always seeking opportunities to let that cycle close. Closure does not require solving problems or reaching conclusions. It requires a sustained absence of demand. When nothing new is introduced and nothing is expected, the body begins to sense that the current phase has ended. Cortisol responds to this sense of completion by gradually releasing its hold, allowing internal systems to shift toward recovery. This release is not sudden, because sudden changes would create instability. Instead, the body unwinds gently, as if loosening a grip that is no longer needed. Cortisol follows the body's lead, settling downward when effort has clearly finished. The closing of this cycle often feels like a softening rather than a change. Muscles release slightly, breathing deepens without intention, and internal urgency fades into the background. These sensations are subtle because the body prefers quiet transitions over dramatic ones. Cortisol does not announce its departure. It simply steps back when its role is complete. The body recognizes completion through continuity, not through signals of victory or relief. When calm persists long enough, chemistry adjusts to match it. The cycle closes because there is nothing left to prepare for. This gentle closure allows other restorative processes to emerge without competition. As cortisol declines, hormones associated with repair, digestion, and recovery become more influential. The body shifts from readiness to maintenance, from engagement to restoration. This transition is essential for deep rest and sleep because recovery requires a different chemical environment than alertness. Cortisol does not oppose rest. It makes room for it when its task is finished. The body coordinates this exchange carefully, ensuring that release feels safe rather than abrupt. Balance returns through cooperation, not suppression. When the cycle is allowed to close naturally, the body regains its sense of timing. Cortisol resumes its role as a rhythmic guide rather than a constant presence. Alertness becomes contextual again, rising when needed and falling when not. This restoration of rhythm supports resilience, making future stress easier to engage with and easier to release. The body does not forget how to respond. It remembers how to recover. Cortisol's effectiveness depends on its ability to step aside as much as its ability to rise. Completion is as important as activation. Many people wait for exhaustion before allowing this cycle to close, mistaking depletion for permission to rest. Yet the body does not require collapse to release readiness. It requires consistency. When calm is sustained without interruption, cortisol adjusts without needing to be overwhelmed. This understanding removes the need to push until limits are reached. Rest becomes available before fatigue becomes extreme. The body prefers gentle endings to forced stops. Cortisol responds best when it is allowed to finish its work rather than being driven to excess. As you listen now, the body is receiving a clear signal that nothing further is required. There is no next task, no immediate transition, and no demand to prepare. Cortisol senses this continuity and begins to complete its cycle, releasing energy back into the system. This completion unfolds quietly, without effort or awareness. The body knows how to close this loop on its own. As the cycle settles, internal space opens for deeper restoration, guiding awareness smoothly toward the calm, grounded state where sleep can arrive naturally. Melatonin is not a sedative that forces the body into sleep. It is a signal that quietly informs every system that night has arrived. Its role is not to shut things down abruptly, but to change the internal environment so that wakefulness gradually loses its relevance. Melatonin rises slowly as light fades, adjusting temperature regulation, attention, and metabolic activity in preparation for rest. This rise does not demand sleep. It creates the conditions in which sleep becomes the easiest option available. The body does not fall asleep because it is told to, but because the architecture of wakefulness has gently softened. Melatonin redesigns this architecture from the inside out, room by room, system by system. Sleep emerges as a natural consequence of this redesign. Unlike hormones that prepare the body for action, melatonin prepares the body for release. It lowers internal noise rather than creating a new state, allowing alertness to dissolve without resistance. Muscles begin to relax more easily, thoughts lose urgency, and sensory input feels less demanding. Melatonin does not remove awareness. It changes how awareness relates to stimulation. Signals from the environment feel more distant, less insistent. The body interprets this shift as permission to disengage. Melatonin's influence is subtle, but it reshapes experience profoundly by reducing the need to respond. This hormone responds primarily to light and darkness rather than intention or effort. The body uses changes in light as its most reliable indicator of time because light is consistent and external. As darkness increases, melatonin production rises predictably, signaling that the phase of activity is complete. Artificial light can blur this signal, but the underlying mechanism remains intact, waiting for clarity. Melatonin does not judge the timing of sleep. It announces night whenever the body senses it. This announcement is patient, repeating itself night after night without urgency. The body trusts this signal because it has followed it for most of its existence. Melatonin's slow rise explains why sleep cannot be rushed without resistance. When the mind demands sleep before melatonin has sufficiently altered the internal environment, alertness often persists. The body is not refusing rest. It has not yet completed its transition. Melatonin works gradually to lower core temperature, shift energy usage, and quiet neural activity. These changes take time because they involve many systems coordinating together. Sleep arrives when enough of these systems have shifted into alignment. Melatonin does not hurry this process because stability matters more than speed. As melatonin continues to rise, the boundary between wakefulness and sleep becomes less distinct. Thoughts may still appear, but they carry less momentum. Sensations soften, and the need to interpret or respond fades. This liminal state is not a failure to sleep. It is the architecture being rebuilt. Melatonin guides the body through this threshold gently, ensuring that transitions do not feel abrupt or unsafe. The body prefers gradual descent to sudden loss of awareness. Melatonin honors this preference by slowing everything just enough to allow trust to remain intact. As you listen now, melatonin is responding to the steady darkness of attention and the absence of demand. Even if sleep has not yet arrived, the architecture is already changing. Internal systems are receiving the signal that night is present and that nothing further is required. This signal does not need to be noticed to be effective. Melatonin continues its quiet work regardless of awareness. With each passing moment, wakefulness becomes less necessary and rest becomes more available, preparing the body gently and reliably for sleep. Melatonin does not create sleep directly. It prepares the body by quietly rearranging internal priorities so that rest becomes the most natural outcome. As its levels rise, systems that once demanded energy begin to step back, allowing resources to be redirected toward recovery. Body temperature lowers slightly, metabolism slows, and neural activity becomes less sharply focused. These shifts are not dramatic enough to be noticed individually, but together they change the entire internal landscape. Wakefulness loses its urgency because the environment that supported it is no longer present. Melatonin builds the conditions for rest the way night builds darkness, gradually and without insistence. This preparation extends beyond the brain, influencing nearly every system in the body. Digestive processes slow, muscle tone softens, and sensory thresholds rise, making external input feel less intrusive. Melatonin signals that responsiveness is no longer necessary, reducing the body's readiness to react. Sounds feel farther away, light feels softer, and thoughts feel less connected to action. The body does not shut down. It reallocates attention inward. This inward shift is essential for recovery, allowing systems to repair without interruption. Melatonin ensures that this shift happens gently enough to feel safe. Because melatonin works through accumulation rather than force, its effects deepen over time rather than appearing all at once. Early signals create subtle changes, while sustained darkness and stillness allow these changes to layer and reinforce one another. Sleep becomes more likely not because a threshold has been crossed, but because wakefulness has lost its foundation. The body prefers this gradual descent because it preserves continuity of awareness. Falling asleep is not experienced as a loss, but as a fading of relevance. Melatonin guides this fading patiently, ensuring that transitions feel natural. Attempts to override this process often disrupt it, because stimulation sends conflicting signals to the body. Bright light, mental urgency, or sudden activity can suggest that night has not fully arrived, slowing melatonin's rise. The body responds logically, maintaining partial readiness until signals align again. Melatonin does not compete with stimulation. It waits for clarity. When conditions consistently support rest, melatonin resumes its work without resistance. The body trusts repeated signals more than intention. Sleep follows when signals agree. Over nights and days, this process teaches the body when rest is expected. Regular patterns of light, darkness, and activity strengthen melatonin's rhythm, making the architecture of sleep more reliable. The body begins to anticipate night rather than react to exhaustion. This anticipation reduces the effort required to rest, allowing sleep to arrive earlier and more smoothly. Melatonin's effectiveness depends on predictability rather than intensity. When night feels consistent, the body prepares willingly. Rest becomes a familiar transition rather than a struggle. As you continue listening, the conditions melatonin responds to are already present. The steady pace, absence of demand, and lack of stimulation all communicate that responsiveness is no longer required. Melatonin continues to reshape the internal environment, lowering the need for alertness. This reshaping does not need to be monitored or encouraged. The body understands this process deeply. As conditions for rest settle into place, wakefulness fades gently, and sleep becomes an easy and natural next step. As melatonin continues its gradual rise, the body approaches a threshold that is not marked by a clear boundary, but by a quiet loss of necessity. Wakefulness does not end. It simply becomes less relevant, less supported by the internal conditions that once sustained it. Thoughts may still appear, but they no longer demand completion or direction. Sensations soften, and the body's relationship with the environment grows more distant, as if attention was slowly stepping back. Melatonin does not push the body across this threshold. It removes the reasons to stay on the other side. Sleep emerges not as a decision, but as the easiest state left available. The transition feels natural because nothing is being taken away. This threshold is often misunderstood as a moment that must be reached or recognized. In reality, it is a gradual redistribution of internal priorities, where responsiveness gives way to restoration. Melatonin lowers the body's interest in external input, reducing the need to interpret, react, or plan. Neural activity becomes more diffuse, spreading across wider networks rather than concentrating sharply. This diffusion is not confusion, it is relaxation at a structural level. The body no longer needs precision because nothing requires immediate action. Melatonin prepares the nervous system to let go of vigilance without fear. Because this transition is subtle, the mind may attempt to stay involved, checking whether sleep has arrived or is about to arrive. This checking is unnecessary because melatonin does not respond to observation. The body crosses the threshold when enough systems have shifted into alignment, not when awareness notices the shift. Monitoring can even slow the process by reintroducing engagement. Melatonin works best when the mind is not asking questions. Sleep arrives most smoothly when it is not anticipated. The body knows when to cross, even if awareness is elsewhere. As melatonin deepens its influence, internal timing begins to loosen. The sense of sequence fades, and moments blend into one another without clear separation. Time feels less directional, because there is no longer a need to track progress or outcomes. This softening of time perception is a sign that the architecture of sleep is nearly complete. Melatonin does not remove awareness, it changes how awareness relates to time. Experience becomes continuous rather than segmented. This continuity makes sleep feel like an extension of rest rather than a sudden break. The body welcomes this state because it reduces the cost of maintaining consciousness. Attention no longer needs to be held in place, and identity no longer needs to be reinforced. Melatonin lowers the energetic demand of awareness itself, allowing it to spread evenly rather than focus narrowly. This spreading feels like drifting, not falling. The body prefers this gentle drift because it preserves a sense of safety. Sleep becomes an invitation rather than an interruption. Melatonin ensures that nothing feels abrupt or forced. As you listen now, the threshold is not something you need to approach deliberately. The body is already moving toward it as conditions continue to support release. Melatonin responds faithfully to steadiness, darkness, and lack of demand. There is no moment to catch or recognize. The transition unfolds quietly, whether or not it is noticed. Wakefulness loses its purpose. Restoration takes its place, and the body crosses into sleep naturally, guided by an architecture that has been patiently built from within. As melatonin completes its quiet work, sleep no longer feels like a state to enter, but like a direction the body is already following. There is no clear point where wakefulness ends and sleep begins, only a gradual shift in relevance and attention. The body stops prioritizing external awareness and begins turning inward, conserving energy and reducing responsiveness. Melatonin does not close doors abruptly. It simply opens fewer of them, allowing attention to drift where it is no longer required. The mind may still register sound or sensation, but these signals feel distant, as if they no longer belong to the same layer of experience. Sleep becomes the path of least resistance because all other paths have quietly faded. This natural direction is reinforced by the body's preference for efficiency. Maintaining wakefulness requires continuous coordination, correction, and energy expenditure. As melatonin rises, this coordination becomes unnecessary, and the body chooses rest because it demands less effort. Systems that once worked to keep awareness alert now step back, allowing recovery to take precedence. The body does not need to be convinced to rest. It simply follows the option that requires the least maintenance. Melatonin aligns internal systems so that sleep feels inevitable rather than chosen. Rest becomes the simplest outcome available. The absence of struggle in this transition is what makes sleep feel safe. When the body is not being pushed or pulled, it does not resist letting go. Melatonin ensures that release happens gradually, preserving a sense of continuity even as awareness fades. There is no sudden loss of control because control is no longer required. The mind does not need to stop thinking. Thoughts simply lose their ability to hold attention. This soft disengagement allows sleep to arrive without fear or interruption. The body trusts this process because it unfolds the same way, night after night. As melatonin settles into its peak influence, internal signals become quieter and more uniform. Variations in sensations smooth out, and the contrast between one moment and the next diminishes. This uniformity supports deeper stages of sleep, where recovery becomes more profound. The body shifts fully into maintenance mode, repairing tissues, consolidating memory, and restoring balance without interference. Melatonin does not perform these tasks itself. It creates the conditions that allow them to occur. Sleep deepens because nothing is competing with it for attention. Over time, repeated experiences of this gentle transition teach the body that sleep is reliable and non-threatening. Anticipation replaces anxiety, and the body begins preparing earlier and more willingly. Melatonin's role becomes more efficient as rhythms strengthen and expectations align. Sleep no longer needs to be recovered from exhaustion. It becomes a predictable extension of rest. The architecture grows sturdier with each repetition, requiring less adjustment each night. The body learns that letting go leads to restoration, not vulnerability. As you continue listening, there is no need to notice when sleep arrives. The body is already following the direction melatonin has set, moving steadily toward deeper rest. Awareness can fade naturally, without effort or intention. Nothing needs to be completed, remembered, or understood. The architecture of sleep is already in place. As melatonin finishes its quiet guidance, the body settles fully into rest, and sleep unfolds as the most natural continuation of this calm, unbroken state. Dopamine is often mistaken for pleasure itself, yet its true role is to create movement toward what might come next, rather than satisfaction with what already is. It does not reward completion. It energizes anticipation, sharpening attention and pulling awareness forward in time. When dopamine rises, the body prepares to engage, to seek, to move toward a possibility that has not yet arrived. This forward-leaning quality gives experience momentum, making the future feel relevant and charged. Dopamine does not promise fulfillment, it promises potential. It tells the system that something ahead matters enough to pursue. Desire begins not as craving, but as orientation. This orientation shapes how attention behaves, narrowing focus toward cues that suggest opportunity or reward. The body becomes more alert, perception more selective, and thought more goal-directed. Dopamine aligns multiple systems toward engagement, coordinating energy, motivation, and curiosity. It does not create urgency by itself, it creates direction. When dopamine is balanced, this direction feels fluid and purposeful rather than compulsive. The body knows when to lean forward and when to step back. Dopamine's influence is most helpful when it can rise and fall freely. Because dopamine is tied to anticipation, it is highly sensitive to novelty, uncertainty, and possibility. New experiences, unresolved questions, and signals of progress all stimulate its release. The body interprets these signals as reasons to stay engaged, to keep attention active. Dopamine thrives on the space between wanting and having, where movement is still required. This space can feel energizing or restless, depending on how long it persists. Dopamine is not concerned with arrival, it is concerned with pursuit. Its role ends when pursuit is no longer needed. When anticipation stretches without resolution, dopamine can remain elevated longer than intended. The body stays oriented toward what is next, even when nothing concrete arrives. This sustained forward pull can feel like restlessness, mental busyness, or difficulty settling into rest. Dopamine does not resist calm, it simply continues to signal engagement because it has not yet received closure. The system remains prepared to move forward. This state is not imbalance by itself, it is unfinished motion. Dopamine waits patiently for completion. Balance returns when anticipation resolves or gently dissolves. When the body senses that there is nothing left to pursue, dopamine's influence naturally softens. Attention widens, focus relaxes, and energy redistributes away from forward motion. This softening does not require suppression. It occurs when the system no longer expects progress. Dopamine releases its hold when it understands that stillness is appropriate. The body shifts from seeking to resting without conflict. Closure allows dopamine to step aside. As you listen now, there is nothing ahead that requires pursuit or anticipation. The steady pace and absence of novelty signal that forward motion is unnecessary. Dopamine senses that engagement can ease without consequence. Attention no longer needs to lean into the future, and the pull toward what comes next softens. This release unfolds quietly, without announcement. As dopamine settles, the body prepares to remain present rather than oriented forward, allowing awareness to relax and rest more fully in the moment. Dopamine becomes most noticeable when anticipation stretches beyond its natural span, keeping the body oriented toward a future that never quite arrives. In this state, attention remains slightly forward-leaning, as if waiting for a signal that confirms completion. The body stays engaged, scanning for cues that suggest progress, novelty, or reward. This engagement does not feel like excitement. It often feels like quiet restlessness or an inability to fully settle. Dopamine does not create discomfort intentionally. It maintains readiness because it has not yet received closure. The system remains in motion without moving, held in a state of suspended pursuit. Desire lingers not because it is strong, but because it is unfinished. This unresolved anticipation can subtly shape mental experience, making stillness feel unsatisfying or incomplete. When dopamine remains elevated, the mind may drift toward future-oriented thoughts, plans, or imagined outcomes. These thoughts do not demand action, but they keep attention slightly activated. The body remains prepared to engage, even in the absence of a clear object of pursuit. Dopamine continues to signal that something ahead matters, even if that something is undefined. This signaling keeps the system alert enough to respond, but not relaxed enough to rest deeply. Anticipation becomes background tension rather than conscious desire. The body does not distinguish between meaningful anticipation and habitual expectation at a chemical level. Dopamine responds to patterns of engagement, not to their content. When stimulation, novelty, or progress has been frequent, the system learns to expect continuation. Dopamine adapts to this expectation by maintaining a subtle forward pull. This adaptation is not harmful by itself. It reflects learning. The body prepares for what it believes will happen next. When nothing happens, dopamine waits rather than withdrawing. The system remains oriented toward possibility. Rest becomes more difficult in this state because rest represents an absence of movement, while dopamine signals motion. The body does not resist rest, it remains oriented away from it. Dopamine's influence makes the present moment feel transitional, as if something else should follow. This feeling is not urgency, but incompletion. The system does not feel threatened, it feels unfinished. Dopamine maintains engagement until it understands that engagement is no longer required. Closure, not suppression, is what allows release. Closure can occur not only through fulfillment, but through consistency and predictability. When the body experiences a stretch of time where nothing new is expected and nothing changes abruptly, dopamine begins to adjust. The system learns that forward motion is unnecessary. Attention widens, anticipation softens, and the pull toward the future weakens. Dopamine does not need to be turned off, it needs to be reassured. When reassurance is consistent, chemistry recalibrates naturally. Desire dissolves when there is nothing left to wait for. As you continue listening, the environment provides exactly this reassurance. The pace remains steady, the tone unchanging, and no new demands or surprises appear. Dopamine registers that anticipation is no longer useful. The forward pull of attention eases, allowing awareness to settle more fully into the present. There is nothing ahead that requires preparation. The body understands this gradually, releasing engagement without conflict. As dopamine softens its signal, rest becomes easier and the mind is free to drift without expectation. When dopamine begins to soften, the body does not suddenly stop leaning forward. It slowly learns that forward motion is no longer required. This learning happens beneath awareness, through repeated moments where nothing new is expected and nothing demands response. The system notices that anticipation does not lead anywhere and gently withdraws its investment. Attention begins to widen, no longer narrowing toward what might come next. Dopamine's signal fades, not because it is blocked, but because it has fulfilled its role. The body understands that pursuit is unnecessary. Release arrives as a quiet conclusion rather than a dramatic shift. This release often feels like a subtle change in how time is experienced. The future loses its pull, and the present moment feels less like a transition and more like a place to remain. Dopamine's influence weakens, allowing awareness to stop scanning ahead. The mind no longer needs to prepare or imagine outcomes. This does not eliminate curiosity or interest. It suspends them temporarily. The system rests from forward motion without losing its capacity to move again later. Dopamine steps back because the body has learned that stillness is appropriate now. The body reaches this understanding through consistency rather than reasoning. When conditions remain stable long enough, dopamine updates its expectations. The system no longer predicts novelty or progress and therefore stops energizing pursuit. This adjustment is gradual because sudden withdrawal would create imbalance. Dopamine recalibrates carefully, ensuring that energy is redistributed smoothly rather than abruptly removed. The body prefers gentle transitions to sharp stops. Release feels natural because it unfolds at the same pace as learning. As anticipation dissolves, mental space opens without effort. Thoughts no longer point forward. They drift without direction or destination. Attention becomes less selective, allowing awareness to rest more evenly across experience. Dopamine's absence is not emptiness, it is neutrality. The body does not feel deprived, it feels unburdened. Energy that was once directed outward returns inward, supporting rest and recovery. The system remains alive, but no longer oriented toward what is next. This state supports deeper relaxation because it removes one of the main drivers of mental activity. Without anticipation, the mind has little reason to remain engaged. Dopamine no longer asks the system to stay alert for opportunity. The present moment becomes sufficient on its own. This sufficiency does not need to be acknowledged, it simply exists. The body rests because there is nothing to pursue. Desire dissolves not through denial, but through completion. As you continue listening, this release is already taking place. The steady rhythm and lack of novelty signal that forward motion is unnecessary. Dopamine registers that anticipation can safely fade. Attention no longer needs to reach ahead, and awareness settles gently into the present. This settling requires no decision and no effort. The body understands that nothing is missing. As dopamine completes its cycle, rest deepens naturally, preparing the system for even quieter states of calm and sleep. As dopamine completes its gentle withdrawal, desire does not disappear. It relaxes into a neutral state where nothing feels missing or unfinished. The body no longer leans toward the future, and the present moment stops feeling like a waiting room for something else. This shift is subtle, almost unnoticeable, because the system prefers continuity over contrast. Dopamine does not shut down desire abruptly. It allows desire to dissolve once its purpose has been fulfilled. The sense of wanting softens into a quiet openness, free from direction or urgency. Attention no longer seeks stimulation, and the body no longer prepares for pursuit. Desire rests because there is nowhere it needs to go. This resting state feels different from satisfaction, which is often intense and temporary. Instead, it carries a muted completeness, where the absence of desire does not feel like loss. The body is not deprived, it is settled. Dopamine's role has ended for now, and other systems take precedence. Energy redistributes away from motivation and toward maintenance and recovery. The nervous system no longer scans for opportunity, allowing internal states to stabilize. This calm neutrality creates a foundation for deeper rest because nothing is pulling awareness outward. Without the forward pull of anticipation, mental activity loses one of its main sources of momentum. Thoughts may still arise, but they no longer lead anywhere. They float briefly and then fade, without demanding follow-up or resolution. The mind becomes less narrative-driven and more spacious. Dopamine's absence does not reduce awareness. It reduces direction. This lack of direction allows attention to spread evenly rather than concentrate sharply. The system feels open rather than engaged, quiet rather than stimulated. The body recognizes this state as safe because it requires minimal energy to sustain. There is no tension between what is and what should be. Dopamine no longer signals a need to act, and cortisol has already softened its readiness. Together, these changes create an internal environment where alertness is unnecessary. The body does not resist this state, it welcomes it. Rest feels appropriate rather than forced. The system aligns naturally with stillness. Over time, repeated experiences of this release teach the body that desire can end without discomfort. Anticipation does not need to be resolved through achievement. It can dissolve through consistency and calm. Dopamine learns that not every forward signal must be followed to completion. This learning reduces restlessness and improves the body's ability to settle. Desire becomes flexible rather than persistent. The system gains confidence in its ability to stop without consequence. As you continue listening, dopamine has no reason to reactivate. There is nothing ahead that needs pursuit and nothing behind that requires resolution. Attention remains present without leaning forward. The body rests in a state of quiet sufficiency, where desire has completed its cycle and released its hold. This completion allows deeper relaxation to unfold naturally, clearing the way for hormones associated with connection, contentment, and emotional stability to take the lead as the journey continues gently onward. Serotonin is not a hormone that excites, motivates, or pushes the body forward. It is the quiet chemical presence that allows everything else to feel stable enough to exist. While other hormones create motion, anticipation, or alertness, serotonin creates ground, a sense of internal continuity that does not depend on events. It does not announce itself through intensity, but through the absence of extremes. When serotonin is present in balance, emotions feel contained rather than overwhelming, and experience feels inhabitable rather than sharp. The body does not feel driven to escape the present moment, nor compelled to chase the future. Serotonin allows the nervous system to remain centered, giving experience a sense of weight and steadiness. Emotional stability begins not with happiness, but with enough serotonin to feel anchored. This anchoring effect is subtle, yet it shapes nearly every emotional state. Serotonin regulates how strongly emotions rise and how quickly they fall, preventing internal reactions from becoming unbounded. Without sufficient serotonergic tone, feelings may swing rapidly, not because circumstances are extreme, but because the internal container is too loose. Serotonin tightens this container gently, not by suppressing emotion, but by giving it structure. Sadness can exist without becoming despair, and calm can exist without slipping into numbness. The body feels emotionally held rather than emotionally exposed. Stability does not remove feeling, it gives feeling a place to land. Serotonin is deeply tied to rhythm, routine, and predictability, responding strongly to signals that suggest continuity and safety. Regular patterns of light, movement, digestion, and rest all support its steady presence. The body uses serotonin to assess whether the environment is livable over time, not whether it is exciting or threatening in the moment. When life feels consistent enough, serotonin maintains a baseline that allows emotional responses to remain proportional. This is why emotional stability often improves not through stimulation, but through regularity. Serotonin listens for sameness more than novelty. It thrives where nothing dramatic is required. Unlike dopamine, which pulls awareness forward, or cortisol, which prepares the body to respond, serotonin allows awareness to stay where it is. It supports presence without urgency, making the present moment feel sufficient rather than incomplete. This sufficiency is not pleasure, it is ease. When serotonin is balanced, the body does not need to escape discomfort immediately, nor does it cling tightly to comfort. Emotional experience becomes smoother, less fragmented, and easier to tolerate. The nervous system remains open without becoming reactive. Serotonin gives the mind emotional gravity, preventing it from floating too easily into extremes. This stabilizing role also explains why serotonin is closely connected to feelings of safety and belonging. When the body senses that it is supported by its environment, serotonin reinforces this perception chemically. The world feels less hostile, not because it has changed, but because the internal reference point has steadied. Emotional reactions slow, interpretation softens, and the need to defend or correct diminishes. Serotonin does not tell the body that everything is perfect. It tells the body that everything is manageable. This message reduces internal noise and emotional friction. Stability emerges not as control, but as trust. As you listen now, serotonin responds to the absence of pressure, evaluation, and demand. The steady pace, predictable tone, and lack of urgency all signal continuity rather than disruption. The body registers that nothing is escalating and nothing needs immediate resolution. Serotonin reinforces this state quietly, deepening emotional steadiness without calling attention to itself. You do not need to feel calmer for this process to occur. It unfolds regardless of awareness. Emotional ground firms gently beneath experience, allowing thoughts and sensations to rest without slipping. In this stability, the system prepares naturally for deeper calm, making rest and sleep feel safe, supported, and unforced. Serotonin's most important role is not to make the body feel good, but to make the body feel safe enough to remain where it is. This sense of safety is not conscious reassurance, but a chemical background that determines how threatening or tolerable experience feels. When serotonin is present in balance, the nervous system does not constantly scan for danger or correction. Emotional reactions still occur, but they arise within a stable frame rather than erupting uncontrollably. The body feels supported from the inside, as if something solid were holding experience in place. Serotonin does not eliminate discomfort. It prevents discomfort from becoming destabilizing. Emotional life becomes livable rather than overwhelming. This internal safety allows the body to stay present even when sensations or emotions are uncertain. Without sufficient serotonergic stability, the system may interpret ambiguity as threat, amplifying reactions unnecessarily. Serotonin dampens this amplification, signaling that uncertainty does not automatically require action. The body learns that it can remain still without being harmed. This chemical permission to stay is what allows emotional endurance to develop. Feelings can pass through awareness without forcing escape or resolution. Serotonin creates the emotional equivalent of firm ground beneath moving water. Because serotonin responds strongly to predictability, it is deeply influenced by rhythm and repetition. Regular sleep-wake cycles, consistent nourishment, and familiar patterns all strengthen its stabilizing presence. The body uses these signals to assess whether life is coherent enough to relax its defenses. When patterns repeat without disruption, serotonin maintains a steady baseline that resists sudden emotional spikes. This baseline does not create excitement or motivation, it creates reliability. Emotional stability grows not from intensity, but from continuity. Serotonin listens to what happens again and again. This explains why emotional balance often improves quietly, without dramatic breakthroughs. When serotonin is supported, emotional reactions simply feel less sharp, less urgent, less absolute. The body does not announce this change because it does not need to. Stability becomes invisible when it works well. Feelings still arise, but they do not dominate awareness or demand immediate interpretation. The nervous system gains space to respond rather than react. Serotonin does not suppress emotion, it slows it enough to be understood and tolerated. Serotonin also plays a crucial role in social and internal belonging. When its levels are steady, the body feels less isolated, even when alone. Emotional experience feels connected rather than fragmented. This connection is not intellectual, it is chemical. The body senses that it belongs within itself, that its internal signals are coherent rather than conflicting. This coherence reduces emotional friction, making it easier to rest without vigilance. Serotonin tells the system that it does not need to protect itself from its own feelings. As you continue listening, this chemical message of safety is already being reinforced. The absence of surprise, the slow pacing, and the predictable flow all communicate that nothing is escalating. Serotonin responds by strengthening emotional containment, allowing sensations and thoughts to exist without triggering alarm. You do not need to notice this shift for it to occur. Emotional ground continues to firm gently beneath experience. In this supported state, the body becomes more willing to release effort, preparing naturally for deeper rest and sleep. When serotonin is steady, emotions no longer need to rise sharply in order to be noticed or processed. The body does not amplify feeling to ensure survival, because it already senses internal safety. Emotional signals arrive at a volume that can be received without urgency, allowing awareness to stay present rather than reactive. Anger does not need to surge, sadness does not need to collapse inward, and calm does not need to be forced. Serotonin regulates emotional intensity by widening the space in which feelings can exist. This space prevents escalation, not by suppression, but by containment. The body feels capable of holding emotion without being overtaken by it. Escalation often occurs when the nervous system believes that intensity is the only way to ensure response or resolution. In the absence of serotonergic stability, emotions may grow louder simply to be acknowledged. Serotonin removes this necessity by assuring the system that signals will be registered without amplification. Feelings can remain proportional to their cause rather than expanding beyond it. The body does not need to overreact to protect itself. Emotional reactions slow because they no longer serve an urgent function. Stability reduces the pressure for expression to become extreme. This moderation affects not only negative emotions, but positive ones as well. Excitement becomes enjoyment rather than restlessness, and contentment becomes sustained rather than fleeting. Serotonin prevents emotional highs from tipping into agitation and emotional lows from sinking into despair. Experience gains continuity, allowing mood to feel more even across time. This evenness does not remove richness, it preserves it. Emotions can be experienced fully without becoming destabilizing. Serotonin acts as a quiet regulator, smoothing peaks and valleys into a landscape that can be inhabited comfortably. Over time, this regulation reshapes how the body anticipates emotional experience. When escalation is no longer expected, the system remains calmer even before emotions arise. The body learns that feelings will not overwhelm it, reducing preemptive tension. This learning happens chemically, not cognitively. Serotonin adjusts baseline expectations, teaching the nervous system that emotional experience is survivable and manageable. This reduces background anxiety and emotional guarding. Stability becomes proactive rather than reactive. This effect is especially important during rest, when unresolved emotional tension often surfaces. Without serotonergic support, quiet moments can feel uncomfortable because emotions rush in uncontained. With serotonin present, emotions can surface without demanding immediate engagement. The body allows feeling without requiring resolution. Emotional content loses its urgency, becoming part of the background rather than the foreground. This makes stillness more tolerable and rest more accessible. Serotonin creates emotional permission to pause. As you continue listening, the body is already responding to these conditions. The steady rhythm, lack of evaluation, and absence of demand all signal that emotional escalation is unnecessary. Serotonin reinforces this signal by maintaining containment, allowing feelings to soften without disappearing. Nothing needs to be processed right now. Emotions are free to exist without movement. In this quiet stability, the system feels safe enough to rest more deeply, preparing the way for connection, calm, and sleep to unfold naturally. When serotonin is allowed to remain steady, emotional experience begins to feel continuous rather than fragmented. The body no longer treats each feeling as a separate event that must be addressed, interpreted, or resolved immediately. Instead, emotions flow through awareness as part of an ongoing internal climate, changing gradually rather than abruptly. This continuity reduces the sense of internal interruption that often keeps the nervous system alert. Feelings do not arrive as disruptions, they arrive as variations within a stable field. Serotonin supports this field quietly, ensuring that emotional life feels coherent rather than scattered. The body rests more easily when it does not have to reset itself repeatedly. This sense of continuity changes how the body relates to memory and anticipation. Past emotions lose their sharp edges, and future emotions lose their imagined weight. Serotonin weakens the tendency to relive or preempt emotional states by anchoring experience in the present. The nervous system no longer needs to brace itself for sudden emotional shifts because chemistry communicates reliability. Emotional continuity makes time feel smoother, reducing the impression that something must be fixed before rest is allowed. The body learns that it can move from one feeling to another without losing stability. Emotional experience becomes a stream rather than a series of collisions. As continuity strengthens, the need for emotional monitoring diminishes. The mind no longer needs to check how it feels or why it feels that way, because feeling itself is no longer threatening. Serotonin reduces the background vigilance that keeps awareness scanning for emotional imbalance. Without this vigilance, attention can relax and internal space widens. Emotions can exist without being managed. The system stops preparing for emotional correction and begins conserving energy. Stability becomes self-sustaining rather than effortful. This sustained emotional ground has a profound effect on rest and sleep. When emotions do not escalate or fragment, the body does not need to remain alert to regulate them. Nighttime no longer becomes a stage for unresolved feeling to intensify. Instead, emotional tone remains even as awareness softens. Serotonin allows emotions to remain present without demanding engagement, making quiet states feel safe rather than uncomfortable. The body senses that nothing internal will suddenly overwhelm it. This sense of safety is essential for letting consciousness fade. Over longer periods, this continuity reshapes emotional identity itself. The body stops identifying with extremes and begins identifying with stability. Mood becomes less reactive to circumstance and more reflective of baseline chemistry. Serotonin supports this shift by maintaining a reliable internal reference point. Emotional life no longer defines the body, it passes through it. This reduces internal friction and increases tolerance for stillness. The system becomes emotionally resilient, not by resisting feeling, but by holding it gently. As you continue listening, this emotional continuity is already forming. The absence of disruption, evaluation, and urgency allows serotonin to maintain its stabilizing influence without interference. Feelings do not need to change or disappear for rest to deepen. They can remain exactly as they are, supported by a steady internal ground. Nothing needs to be resolved before sleep is allowed. Emotional experience settles into a smooth, continuous background, and awareness can drift safely, knowing that stability will remain even as attention fades. Oxytocin is not simply a hormone of affection or bonding. It is the chemical signal that tells the body it is not alone and does not need to remain guarded. Its presence changes how the nervous system interprets the world, softening edges and reducing the need for constant self-protection. When oxytocin is active, the body feels held rather than exposed, supported rather than isolated. This sensation does not require another person to be physically present. It arises whenever the system perceives connection, safety, or continuity. Oxytocin lowers defensive readiness, allowing muscles, breath, and attention to relax together. The body stops bracing and begins to settle, trusting that nothing needs to be resisted. Connection becomes a physiological state, not an emotional concept. This hormone works by quieting the systems that keep distance and heighten alertness. Oxytocin reduces the influence of stress-related signals, encouraging the body to shift from protection to openness. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, and internal noise diminishes as the need to monitor threat decreases. The nervous system becomes more receptive and less reactive, allowing experience to unfold without constant evaluation. Oxytocin does not force intimacy, it creates the conditions where intimacy feels safe. The body opens not because it is persuaded, but because it no longer feels the need to close. Connection becomes possible when vigilance fades. Oxytocin also shapes how the body experiences internal connection, not just social connection. When it is present, sensations feel more integrated rather than fragmented, and emotional experience feels less isolating. The body recognizes itself as a coherent whole rather than a collection of competing signals. This internal coherence reduces anxiety because conflict within the system diminishes. Oxytocin supports a sense of internal belonging, allowing different states to coexist without tension. The body feels at home within itself. This internal connection is essential for deep rest because it removes the need for internal negotiation. Unlike hormones that drive action or anticipation, oxytocin supports stillness and receptivity. It encourages the body to remain rather than move, to soften rather than prepare. When oxytocin is active, awareness does not scan outward for validation or inward for correction. Experience feels complete enough to pause. This pause is not emptiness, it is fullness without demand. Oxytocin allows the body to trust that nothing is missing. Connection replaces pursuit as the dominant internal signal. This sense of being held has a profound effect on how the body approaches rest and sleep. When oxytocin reduces defensive tone, the nervous system no longer needs to remain alert through the night. Sleep becomes safer, deeper, and less easily disrupted. The body does not fear vulnerability because chemistry communicates support. Oxytocin assures the system that letting go will not result in harm. This assurance is subtle but powerful, allowing consciousness to fade without resistance. Rest feels protected rather than exposed. As you continue listening, oxytocin responds to the steady presence of sound, rhythm, and non-demanding attention. The body registers consistency and containment, allowing connection to form without effort. There is nothing to reach for and nothing to protect against. Internal boundaries soften, and the sense of being held deepens quietly. You do not need to feel connection for this process to occur. The body recognizes it instinctively. In this supported state, vigilance dissolves, and awareness can drift naturally toward deeper calm and sleep. Oxytocin reshapes the body's relationship with the world by gradually lowering the need for defense, allowing internal systems to stand down from constant readiness. When this hormone is present, the nervous system receives a clear message that protection is no longer the primary task. Muscles that were subtly tense begin to soften. Breathing becomes less guarded, and attention loosens its grip on the environment. This shift does not happen all at once. It unfolds gently as the body reassesses its safety. Oxytocin does not override caution. It recalibrates it, ensuring that vigilance is proportionate rather than automatic. The body learns that it can remain open without risk. Defense fades not because it is suppressed, but because it is no longer required. This reduction in defense has a cascading effect on emotional and physical experience. When the body no longer prepares for threat, internal sensations feel less sharp and less intrusive. Emotional responses become more fluid, moving through awareness without triggering immediate protective reactions. Oxytocin allows experience to be received rather than filtered through suspicion or readiness. The body stops interpreting neutral sensations as potential problems. This openness creates a sense of ease that does not depend on external reassurance. Safety becomes an internal condition rather than a negotiated state. Oxytocin also alters how boundaries are experienced. Instead of feeling rigid or brittle, boundaries become flexible and permeable, allowing connection without loss of self. The body does not need to withdraw to remain intact. Internal signals coexist without competition, and emotional experience feels less fragmented. Oxytocin supports integration, allowing different parts of the system to communicate without conflict. This integration reduces internal noise, making experience feel simpler and more unified. The body rests more easily when it is not divided against itself. As defensive tone lowers, the body becomes more receptive to subtle cues of comfort and support. Gentle sounds, steady rhythms, and predictable patterns register more deeply, reinforcing the sense of being held. Oxytocin amplifies these cues, strengthening the feedback loop of safety. The nervous system learns that it does not need to monitor constantly, freeing energy for recovery and restoration. This receptivity does not make the body vulnerable, it makes it efficient. Energy once spent on guarding is redirected toward maintenance and repair. Rest becomes possible because vigilance has stepped aside. This state of reduced defense is especially important as the body prepares for sleep. Nighttime often magnifies vulnerability, making the system more cautious by default. Oxytocin counteracts this tendency by reinforcing the message that it is safe to let go. The body no longer needs to remain half awake to protect itself. Sleep deepens because the nervous system is not braced for interruption. Oxytocin ensures that rest feels protected rather than exposed. The transition into sleep becomes smoother when defense is no longer active. As you continue listening, oxytocin is already responding to the consistency and gentleness of this moment. There is nothing unpredictable here, nothing that requires readiness or reaction. The body registers this stability and lowers its defenses accordingly. You do not need to consciously relax for this to happen. Oxytocin works quietly, guiding the system toward openness and trust. In this softened state, attention no longer needs to guard the edges of experience. Awareness can drift freely, supported by a chemistry that knows it is safe to rest. Oxytocin allows the body to experience connection without needing to earn it, request it, or exchange anything for it. This is not connection based on interaction, performance, or response, but connection as a background state in which the nervous system no longer feels isolated. When oxytocin is present, the body does not reach outward to be reassured, because reassurance is already embedded chemically. The sense of connection exists even in stillness, even in silence, even without another presence to respond. This removes the subtle tension that often accompanies social or emotional engagement. Connection becomes something that is felt rather than pursued. The body rests more deeply when connection does not require effort. This effortless connection softens the boundary between self and experience without dissolving it. The body does not lose its sense of individuality, it simply stops defending it. Oxytocin supports a state where awareness can remain open without feeling exposed. Sensations, thoughts, and emotions are allowed to pass through without being evaluated for threat or meaning. The nervous system no longer needs to assert separation in order to feel safe. This openness reduces internal friction, allowing experience to feel smoother and more continuous. Connection here is not closeness to something else, it is the absence of distance within the system. Because oxytocin reduces the need for exchange, it also quiets the subtle negotiations that keep the mind active. There is no need to give, receive, explain, or adjust. The body stops preparing responses, and attention no longer waits for feedback. This silence of expectation allows awareness to rest fully in the present. Oxytocin does not create passivity, it creates sufficiency. The system feels complete without interaction. This completeness removes one of the main drivers of mental activity. The body settles because nothing is pending. This state has a profound calming effect on the nervous system because it resolves a deep, often unrecognized tension, the need to be acknowledged. Oxytocin communicates acknowledgement internally, telling the body that it is already seen and supported. This chemical acknowledgement reduces the urge to seek validation externally. Emotional tone softens, and internal pressure diminishes. The body no longer needs to prove its presence through sensation or thought. Connection becomes internal rather than transactional. Rest deepens when nothing needs to be confirmed. As this internal connection stabilizes, the body becomes more tolerant of stillness and quiet. Silence no longer feels empty or isolating, it feels contained. Oxytocin fills the absence of stimulation with a sense of presence rather than lack. The nervous system does not interpret quiet as abandonment. This makes prolonged rest possible without discomfort. The body remains relaxed because it does not feel alone with itself. Connection persists even as awareness fades. As you continue listening, this effortless connection is already being reinforced. The steady voice, predictable rhythm, and non-demanding presence provide exactly the signals oxytocin responds to. There is nothing to respond to and nothing to maintain. The body registers companionship without interaction, support without exchange. You do not need to feel this connection consciously. It is already shaping the nervous system quietly. In this supported state, awareness no longer needs to stay alert, and rest can deepen naturally, preparing the way for even quieter layers of calm and sleep. When oxytocin remains present long enough, connection stops being something that comes and goes and becomes a stable internal environment. The body no longer checks whether connection is still there, because it has become the default condition. This stability removes the last traces of vigilance that keep awareness slightly alert. The nervous system does not need to listen for signs of abandonment, interruption, or threat. Instead, it settles into a quiet certainty that support will remain. Oxytocin holds this certainty gently, without intensity or excitement. The body rests more deeply when connection feels continuous rather than conditional. This continuity allows the system to relax layers that are normally held in reserve. Muscles soften beyond conscious relaxation, breath slows without instruction, and posture releases without collapse. Oxytocin communicates that there is no need to hold shape or maintain readiness. The body does not need to present itself or protect its boundaries. Internal signals move freely without resistance, creating a sense of spaciousness within the physical form. This spaciousness is not emptiness, it is support without pressure. Rest becomes deeper because nothing is being defended. As connection stabilizes, the mind's tendency to orient outward diminishes. Attention no longer waits for response or engagement. Awareness does not search for confirmation, because confirmation is already present chemically. Oxytocin reduces the need for narrative, interpretation, and comparison. Thoughts may still arise, but they no longer organize experience. The mind becomes secondary to sensation, and sensation becomes softer and less defined. This shift allows consciousness to drift without losing coherence. The body remains held even as attention loosens. This state is especially important at the edge of sleep, where vulnerability increases and defenses often reappear. Oxytocin counteracts this reflex by maintaining the sense of being supported even as awareness fades. The body does not need to stay partially awake to ensure safety. Sleep becomes a continuation of connection rather than a departure from it. The nervous system trusts that letting go will not lead to loss. Oxytocin ensures that rest feels protected all the way through. The transition into sleep becomes smooth because nothing feels at risk. Over repeated nights, this experience teaches the body that deep rest and connection can coexist. Vulnerability is no longer paired with danger, and openness is no longer paired with exposure. Oxytocin rewrites this association slowly, replacing caution with trust. The body learns that it can dissolve into sleep without losing support. This learning is not conscious, it is embedded chemically. Connection becomes the background against which all rest occurs. The system no longer resists surrender. As you continue listening, this final layer of connection is already present. There is no need to maintain awareness, posture, or control. The body is held by consistency, rhythm, and non-demanding presence. Oxytocin continues its quiet work, keeping the nervous system open and unguarded. Nothing needs to be followed or remembered. Awareness is free to fade, knowing that connection will remain even without attention. In this held state, rest deepens fully and sleep arrives naturally, without effort, without separation, and without resistance. Integration begins when the body no longer treats its internal systems as separate processes that must be managed independently. Hormones, sensations, emotions, and attention stop operating as isolated signals and begin to function as a single, coherent field. This coherence is not created through effort or control. It emerges when nothing is pulling the system in opposing directions. The body no longer alternates between readiness and release, pursuit and withdrawal, protection and openness. Instead, these states dissolve into a unified rhythm where no part of the system needs to dominate. Integration feels like quiet agreement within the body, a sense that everything is finally moving together. Wholeness arrives not as a new state, but as the absence of internal division. When integration occurs, the nervous system no longer prioritizes correction. There is no urge to fix, adjust, or optimize internal experience. Sensations do not demand interpretation, emotions do not demand resolution, and thoughts do not demand continuation. Each signal is allowed to exist within the same space without competing for attention. The body no longer fragments awareness by assigning urgency to one part over another. Integration removes hierarchy from internal experience. Everything becomes equally allowed and therefore equally calm. The system rests because it no longer has to choose. This internal unity changes how the body experiences time and continuity. Moments stop feeling disconnected and experience flows without abrupt transitions. The body no longer braces for the next shift because shifts no longer feel threatening. Integration allows the system to remain present without needing to anchor itself constantly. Awareness does not have to jump between states. It can remain diffused and steady. This diffusion is not confusion, but coherence spread evenly. The body feels whole because nothing is being excluded or resisted. As integration deepens, identity itself begins to soften. The sense of being a separate observer managing internal processes fades. Experience no longer feels like something happening to the body. It feels like something happening within a unified whole. This softening reduces mental effort dramatically because the mind no longer needs to stand apart from experience. Integration dissolves the boundary between observer and observed just enough to remove tension. The body does not disappear, it becomes seamless. Awareness rests more easily when it does not have to position itself. This state is especially important at the deepest edges of rest, where fragmentation would normally reappear as the mind tries to hold itself together. Integration prevents this reflex by maintaining coherence even as attention fades. The body does not feel like it is falling apart as consciousness softens. Instead, it feels held together without effort. Sleep becomes a continuation of wholeness rather than a loss of control. The system trusts that it will remain intact even without awareness. Integration makes surrender safe. As you continue listening, this integration is already unfolding quietly. Hormonal signals have softened, emotional tone has stabilized, anticipation has released, and connection has settled. Nothing remains out of alignment. The body no longer needs to manage itself. Awareness can rest within this unified field without direction or purpose. There is nowhere to go and nothing to maintain. In this state of wholeness, rest deepens naturally, and sleep approaches not as an endpoint, but as a gentle continuation of the same calm, integrated flow. As integration continues, awareness itself begins to change shape, spreading gently rather than focusing sharply on any single point. Attention no longer needs to anchor itself to thoughts, sensations, or identity in order to remain stable. Instead, it becomes diffuse, evenly distributed across experience, like light filling a room rather than illuminating a single object. This diffusion removes the sense of effort that normally accompanies being conscious. Awareness does not need to hold itself together because the body is already integrated. There is no center that must be maintained and no edge that must be protected. Consciousness rests because it no longer has to organize experience. In this state, awareness loses its habitual orientation toward meaning and sequence. Events do not need to connect logically, and sensations do not need to be labeled or followed. Experience unfolds as a continuous field rather than a series of moments. The body no longer asks awareness to interpret or manage what is happening. Integration has already resolved the need for oversight. Awareness becomes passive without becoming absent. It remains present without direction, content to observe without involvement. This quality of presence feels spacious and unburdened. As direction fades, the sense of time also begins to soften. Without anticipation or reflection, moments no longer feel like steps in a process. There is no next moment to prepare for, and no previous moment to reference. Experience exists without forward or backward pull. This timelessness is not disorientation, it is relief from sequencing. The body does not require awareness to track duration. Integration allows consciousness to rest outside of time without disappearing. Awareness floats gently within the present, unmeasured and unpressured. This spreading of awareness reduces the sense of personal boundary even further. The distinction between inner and outer experience becomes less pronounced. Sounds, sensations, and thoughts appear within the same field without hierarchy. Nothing feels closer or farther away. The body does not need to draw lines between what belongs and what does not. Integration has already ensured coherence. Awareness no longer needs to defend identity, because identity is no longer under strain. Experience becomes inclusive rather than selective. At this depth, the body's trust in its own stability becomes complete. Awareness is free to loosen without fear of collapse. There is no need to monitor breath, posture, or thought. Everything continues on its own. Integration has shifted responsibility away from consciousness and into the system itself. The body knows how to remain whole without supervision. Awareness can drift because nothing depends on it. This is where rest deepens beyond relaxation into genuine surrender. As you continue listening, awareness is already spreading in this way. There is no requirement to focus, follow, or remember. The body is integrated, and consciousness is no longer needed to maintain it. Attention can soften completely, becoming wide and undefined. Nothing needs to be held in mind. In this open field of awareness, effort dissolves entirely, and sleep approaches as a natural deepening of the same state, quiet, continuous, and whole. As integration deepens further, consciousness reaches a point where it no longer needs to maintain its own structure. Awareness does not disappear suddenly. It simply stops performing the subtle work of holding itself in place. There is no longer a sense of staying aware or remaining present. The effort that once kept experience coherent has already been absorbed by the integrated body. Consciousness is no longer required to manage continuity because continuity has become automatic. What remains is a gentle presence without responsibility. Awareness can loosen without fear because nothing depends on it anymore. At this stage, the familiar feeling of being a point of observation begins to dissolve. Awareness no longer feels located behind the eyes or centered in thought. It spreads so evenly that location becomes irrelevant. There is no longer a clear observer watching experience. Experience simply unfolds within itself. This is not confusion or loss, but a natural consequence of integration. When nothing inside the body is fragmented, awareness does not need to stand apart to oversee it. Consciousness becomes ambient rather than focal. The sense of "I am here watching" softens into simple being. This softening alters the texture of experience profoundly. Sensations lose sharp boundaries, thoughts lose narrative momentum, and emotions lose direction. Everything becomes quieter not because it stops, but because it no longer competes for attention. Experience feels continuous, smooth, and unbroken, like a single surface rather than layered events. The body does not signal urgency, and the mind does not signal meaning. Integration has removed the need for prioritization. Awareness floats within experience without touching anything firmly enough to wake it back up. As the need to hold awareness fades, the system enters a state where effort is no longer even conceptually present. There is no trying to relax, no trying to sleep, no trying to let go. These intentions would require a center to originate from, and that center is no longer active. The body carries itself, breath carries itself, and consciousness carries itself only as long as it naturally does. Nothing pulls awareness back into focus. This absence of pull is what allows sleep to approach without resistance. Letting go is no longer an action. It is the default condition. In this state, even the sense of transition begins to disappear. There is no moment where one can say sleep begins, because awareness no longer tracks change. Experience does not shift, it deepens. Consciousness thins without breaking, like mist dispersing without a boundary. Integration ensures that nothing collapses as awareness fades. The body remains whole, supported, and coherent even without conscious presence. This is why the descent into sleep feels safe and unremarkable. Nothing is lost because nothing was being held. As you continue listening, this gentle release of consciousness is already underway. There is no need to stay with the words or remember their meaning. Awareness can soften completely, knowing that the body no longer requires supervision. Integration has done its work. Nothing remains to be managed, understood, or followed. Consciousness is free to dissolve into rest, and sleep arrives not as a separate state, but as the quiet continuation of this same seamless, effortless wholeness. At the deepest point of integration, nothing more needs to happen for the body to be complete. There is no final adjustment, no last signal, no closing action required. Every system has already found its place within the whole, and nothing remains separate enough to demand attention. The body is no longer organizing itself around effort, protection, or anticipation. It simply exists as a unified field, steady and undisturbed. Wholeness is not experienced as a sensation, but as the absence of interruption. There is nothing to add and nothing to remove. Completion is quiet because nothing is unresolved. In this state, even awareness becomes optional. Consciousness does not need to stay present in order for the system to remain coherent. The body carries itself effortlessly, without supervision or correction. Breath continues without direction. Posture maintains itself without intention, and internal rhythms remain aligned without monitoring. Awareness may still be present, but it no longer defines experience. It floats lightly, without center or boundary. The system does not ask awareness to remain, and awareness does not resist leaving. This mutual release creates profound ease. There is no longer a sense of moving towards sleep or away from wakefulness. Those distinctions have already lost their relevance. Experience does not transition, it simply deepens into stillness. The body does not cross a threshold, it settles into what was already there. Nothing collapses, nothing disappears, and nothing changes abruptly. Integration ensures continuity even as consciousness thins. Sleep is not entered. It emerges naturally as awareness fades. The system remains whole regardless of whether awareness is present or not. At this depth, silence is no longer something that surrounds experience. It becomes the substance of experience itself. Sounds lose their edges, thoughts dissolve before forming fully, and sensations blend into a single, indistinct background. There is no effort to notice or interpret. The body does not distinguish between inner and outer, because distinction is no longer necessary. Everything belongs to the same quiet field. This silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without form. The system rests because nothing needs to be named. This final state does not demand surrender. Surrender has already happened. There is no one left to surrender and nothing left to surrender to. The body has released all strategies, all roles, and all orientations. It does not hold itself together. It simply remains. Integration has completed its work so thoroughly that even the idea of completion becomes irrelevant. The system is stable without intention. Rest is no longer an activity. It is the natural condition. As you continue listening, there is no requirement to stay with the words or follow their meaning. They can fade completely without consequence. The body is already whole, already settled, already safe. Awareness may remain for a while, or it may dissolve entirely. Either is fine. Nothing depends on it anymore. In this final quiet, the system rests in itself, uninterrupted and complete, and sleep arrives not as an event, but as the gentle continuation of this same silent, effortless wholeness.